China's economic story is built on deceit. The Chinese leadership might not even know how bad the problem is, but they only have themselves to blame for that. Welcome to China Uncensored. I'm Chris Chappell, and you are amazing. Within just 1 week, you helped us raise more than $32,000 to build our new censorship-free China Uncensored website. I'm seriously in awe of how amazing China Uncensored viewers are. Thanks to your support, we should be ready to launch this amazing new website in just a few weeks. We'll be giving you exclusive episodes, special live streams, and a members-only chat. And as promised, now that we've met our initial fundraising goal, we're ready to do even more for you. The next step will be a mobile app where you can have an even better ad-free platform to watch China Uncensored. And for anyone who contributes $15 or more before October 31st, you'll get your first month's premium subscription for free. And there's other rewards too. So go to givesendgo.com/China Uncensored or click the link below and help us make China Uncensored even better. Now, on with the show. Well, it's official, the People's Republic of China is 75 years old. And what a glorious 75 years it's been under the country's founders, the Communist Party. Okay, maybe there's been a few small hiccups along the way, what with millions leaving, millions dying, and millions locked up, but there's been a ton of good stuff too, like, look at the pretty fireworks. But communists aren't known for reflecting on the atrocities of the past, mainly because communism has no atrocities and no past. It's the end of history, Marx said so. Instead, the theme of this year's PRC anniversary was March Forward. And in this March Forward, state media stories were all about the strength of the Chinese economy, which is an interesting take on the situation. But the CCP is all about moving forward. So leading up to the anniversary, they announced a whatever it takes stimulus, with measures that include lowering borrowing costs to inject more liquidity into the economy, as well as easing mortgage repayments for households. And I'm sure this will work out great. I mean, when has a plan from communist China ever gone horribly wrong? Following the announcement, Chinese stocks experienced their biggest single-day rally since 2008, causing global investors to gear up to get back into Chinese equities. Until the Chinese officials actually announced their extremely non-specific stimulus plan. Then, the stocks tumbled the most since 2020, right before the pandemic. But when listening to the official narrative, there's really no reason for investors to hold back. After all, Chinese growth has reportedly hit growth targets approaching 5% since early last year. China is also apparently surging ahead when it comes to what Chinese leader Xi Jinping has called new quality productive forces, such as electric vehicles, lithium-ion batteries, and photovoltaic products like solar panels. Those solar panels will come in handy, assuming the sun can pierce all that smog. At the same time, China is reportedly leading the global race for new patents in the field of AI, according to the UN. Surely setting the stage for lots of extra economic growth to come. The problem with this economic success story, though, is that it's highly misleading, if not an outright lie. The economy has been plagued by a massive housing crisis for years now. Youth unemployment is increasing. The effects of deflation are setting in, and consumer confidence is approaching an all-time low. But on the bright side, more fireworks. With all that going on, it can be difficult to believe that growth rates have remained relatively stable, around 5%, which just so happens to be the government's growth target for the year. Which is about as believable as two kids stacked inside a trench coat showing an ID at a bar that says date of birth 21 years ago, and it's written in crayon. Meanwhile, as the top leadership talks about 5% growth rates, for many Chinese people, it actually feels like the economy is in recession. And I'm not the only person raising doubts about the reliability of China's official growth numbers as a meaningful economic metric. According to a confidential memo in 2007, China's premier from 2013 to 2023, Li Keqiang, told the then U.S. ambassador to China that China's GDP figures are man-made and unreliable. At the time, Li was head of the CCP in the northeastern Liaoning province, and instead of the official growth numbers, he would turn to data points like electricity consumption, rail cargo volume, and bank lending to get a more accurate sense of his province's economic performance. And if you take a page out of Li's book and look behind the official GDP numbers today, you will quickly find some pretty serious issues with the official narrative. You see, China's economic growth has increasingly been fueled by debt. That was less of a problem in the early years when debt-fueled investments were channeled into meeting a high demand for Chinese industrial products, infrastructure projects, and properties. But after years of soaring expansion in these sectors, eventually you stop needing factories producing the same goods and bridges over the same river. And we all know what the demand has looked like for Chinese properties lately. If you, despite this, keep throwing debt at the same things, well, then you've got a problem. That's where China is today. Its growth is buried under a great wall of debt. With available data from 2022 showing that debt reached almost 3 times the size of the country's official GDP numbers. They have the type of debt that would make someone that took out $200,000 in student loans to get a PhD in philosophy of Michael Bay movies go, man, you should have planned for the future better. So as the more traditional avenues of growth have turned into debt makers, the Chinese authorities have instead diverted more investments towards Xi's new quality productive forces, particularly clean tech products, in an attempt to ensure the next surge of economic growth. But recently, the same cycle has been playing out in China's clean tech industries, which is crazy, because you know what they say, those who don't learn from history, or, think they've achieved the end of history, are doomed to repeat it. On the solar front, for example, Chinese production capacity of modules is expanding so rapidly that it's forecast to be able to meet global demand twice over by 2027. Solar prices have already hit rock bottom worldwide because of the Chinese overcapacity, meaning that anyone not pumped up on state subsidies or protected from Chinese solar exports can't compete. It's a similar situation in China's electric car industry, where Chinese companies are estimated to be producing an excess capacity of 5 to 10 million vehicles per year. In fact, there's so much state funding in EV production that local governments have used the money to resurrect EV firms as so-called zombies, unproductive firms that can just about service their debt and make payroll, but besides that don't provide any economic value, because they believe in quantity over quality. Their entire economic system is built on the same basic philosophy as a gross all-you-can-eat buffet that says if you want a sneeze guard, go somewhere fancy like Sizzler. In the short term, these massive investments might be generating some growth, which will help the government reach its GDP target. Yet, in the long term, they constitute a massive waste of funds and industrial capacity that will lead to even more debt. The Chinese authorities might have hoped that all this overcapacity could be tackled through exports, but that looks increasingly unlikely, as China's 2 biggest export markets, the US and the EU, have restricted imports of Chinese EVs due to concerns over national security and unfair competition. And despite all the money being pumped into other technologies of the future, the results haven't reached expectations. For example, massive funds have been set up to make China a semiconductor powerhouse. However, a lot of this funding has drowned in corruption scandals and poor investment choices. Because of course it has. I'd honestly be more shocked at a story involving the CCP that doesn't involve corruption and poor decisions. And while China might be leading in the quantity of new AI patents, as the UN has reported, a study from last year shows that when it comes to patents on leading-edge technologies, local governments have been gaming the numbers by channeling relatively more effort towards boosting non-novel, possibly junk patents over novel patents. Again, new patents might look good on paper, but in reality, much of it is just hot air, with the academics behind the study concluding that China's innovation drive is susceptible to manipulation and waste. It is enormous in scale, but low in productivity. So their robots are less Terminator and more Rock'em Sock'em. Unfortunately, there's even more waste under the rug. Probably because they can't even get AI correct on Roomba vacuums. Local governments are often the ones in charge of executing economic policies and raising the money for all the grand visions coming down from Beijing. To do so, they have borrowed heavily from China's official financial institutions and raised money off the books through unofficial channels to fill in the gaps. The result is a monstrosity of hidden debt that no one really knows the true size of, but that has been estimated to be a staggering $11 trillion, an amount equivalent to about 60% the size of the whole economy. So let's sum it up. There's hidden debt, junk tech patents, zombie firms, and new industries producing for the void. Huge amounts of waste being generated, and there's so much murky stuff going on in the shadows that if we look at the latest GDP growth alone, we could easily be left with a hugely distorted impression of the Chinese economy. At this point in the story, it's easy to point fingers at local governments and officials throughout China, given the important part they play in meeting the ambitious growth targets set by Beijing. Given the responsibilities that fall to officials out in the provinces, it has been argued that the central leadership itself doesn't actually know how bad the situation is, with some speculating that Xi himself is being kept in the dark about the sour state of the economy. Even if that's true, it doesn't mean that the CCP leadership is without blame for the murky mess that China finds itself in economically. The central government is known for placing tremendous pressure on officials further down the chain of command to deliver the economic growth targets set by those at the top, by any means necessary. On top of that, any official hoping to advance at some point in their career has no choice but to deliver, because if they don't, they could get fired. And they don't want that because they know more than anyone how horrible the economy is. Such a system sets the stage for short-sighted decision-making and cooked books. Meanwhile, the central authorities haven't exactly been nurturing an open and honest atmosphere regarding the challenges facing the economy. Last month, leading Chinese economist Zhu Hongpeng disappeared and hasn't been seen since he allegedly improperly discussed central policies in a private chat group. In recent months, the think tank that Zhu worked for has had to undergo several political education sessions with a heavy focus on party loyalty and adherence to Xi Jinping thought. Maybe not the most productive assignment to give some of China's leading economists at a time when the Chinese economy is clearly struggling and already soaked in politics. But Chinese experts are being kept on a short leash these days, with China-based academics having previously told The Guardian of a growing fear among their profession of reporting or discussing negative assessments of China's economic, social, or political situation for fear of reprisals. Even Hu Xijin, a well-known political and economics commentator and former editor-in-chief of my favorite Chinese state-run media, the Global Times, who is as pro-CCP as they come, has been silent on social media since late July, after he posted an analysis of Chinese economic policies that apparently rubbed the CCP the wrong way. The CCP has everyone around them basically saying, if it's what you want, just keep steering towards that iceberg, Captain. I'm sure the Titanic can handle it. When the CCP is cutting off even your most ardent supporters for their comments about the economy, you know the situation has got to be really tense, no matter how broad a smile they're trying to put on it in public. But on the bright side, China does have something to look forward to. More fireworks! And once again, thank you to all of you who are helping make the new censorship-free China Uncensored premium website a reality. And for everyone else, there's still time to be part of this and get some cool rewards too. Click below to visit givesendgo.com/China Uncensored, pledge your support, and leave a comment for me to read about what you hope to see on the new site. And in my ongoing attempt to talk about things YouTube considers too controversial by hiding them in gaming content, to honor Columbus Day, or as some call it, Indigenous Peoples Day, check out this video about Diablo 4 and some of the myths you've been told about Christopher Columbus. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. See you next time.